We really try to encourage people to look at anti-blackness first, because white supremacy gives anti-blackness a space to hide.
I think a lot of people think that white supremacy is this, alt-right movement, or like the Proud Boys, etc. But it's, it's everywhere. I think a lot of people who are well-meaning, and I'm not excluding myself, don't necessarily see it. What are some of these examples?
6 years ago in Ferguson, Missouri, the conversation was around, resistance to the police. And so what came out of that resistance was this idea that body cameras was going to circumvent the murders of Black people by the police. And here we are 6 years later, still seeing Black people murdered, now on cameras. And so I think that's a great example of anti-Black legislation that was created. Black people were saying, we actually want to abolish the police. We're sick of the police killing us. What came from that was legislative measures, really influenced by white constituents and white voters, that said body cameras are the solutions to those Black people problems. And if we have body cameras, we'll be able to justify why these Black people are being murdered on camera. And so, 6 years later, after we've seen Eric Garner murdered on video, we've seen Tamir Rice murdered on video, we've seen just so many different atrocities happen on video, we don't have anything, and so now we have a new demand. And I worry about whether or not that demand will be met based on what do-gooders and people with good intentions desires are politically. I think it's so important to continue to follow the demands that Black people are naming, as opposed to trying to create our own demands around what we think Black people need. We've already told you. Yeah, I could go on and on around, so many different examples of how anti-Blackness takes shape in policy, but also in culture, because I think that there's a lot of anti-Black culture, just even, I won't say names, I won't do it, but just, there are white influencers who are able to build billion-dollar, companies really off of their commodification of Black culture. And Black people who've been leading culture in the beauty industry and so many industries are not able to necessarily, create the cash cow economically for themselves, which is why, having a politic around capitalism is so important, because it doesn't really serve anybody. But we have seen it consistently serve white people. And I think that's a great tension in society that we have to also interrupt.
Who could you possibly be talking about? With the
it's so many. Who could I possibly not be talking about? That's the gag, because there's so many who've been able to really ascend, even just like Jeffree Star, just the commodification of trans culture. I think there's just a lot to be said around who's able to capitalize off of Blackness.
Thank you so much for watching.
And make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, okay?